the days of Pontius Pilate. You're allowed to fall asleep. The story won't be offended. If you'd like more, you can subscribe. Chapter 1: Crimson Dawn. You are Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea, and the morning has the color of old copper. The sky above the road runs thin and red, like a stretched cloth held up to the sun. Behind you the column moves with the patient rhythm of trained bodies and leather. Harness rings click. Sand grinds under hooves. A centurion's cough travels neatly down the line, as if it has orders. Your head aches in a way that feels both personal and administrative. It begins behind the eyes, a dull pressure that makes the world slightly narrower, as if the day is being viewed through a slit cut in a curtain. You have learned the stages of it. First, the tightness, then the heat, then the bright stab when you look too quickly at anything pale. Stone, linen, the edge of a shield. You keep your gaze on the road and let the rest of the city arrive on its own. Banga trots close to your knee, heavy paws landing as softly as a large animal can manage. He keeps his mouth open, tongue dark in the cool air, and you can feel the simple steadiness of him without needing to look down. When his shoulder brushes your calf, it is not affection exactly. It is information. He is here. He is watching. He has noticed the morning smell of smoke and pressed olive leaves, and the faint sourness of a crowd that slept too many bodies to a room. You came up from Caesarea before dawn, before the coastal damp could settle into the folds of your tunic. Caesarea is easy in its way. The sea keeps it honest. Salt makes everything smell like itself. Even arguments there have room to breathe. Jerusalem does not breathe. It holds its air, and everyone inside learns to inhale carefully. The city rises ahead in pale steps, walls catching the red light on their edges. From a distance it looks calm, a place drawn in simple lines, a place that might contain orderly people. Closer, it becomes something else, a layered noise, a churn under the stone. As you ride, you can already taste the dust that 100,000 feet will lift and carry. The gate opens to you because it must. Soldiers at the entrance straighten, palms to their standards, eyes forward, faces set in that useful expression that says, "There are no surprises here." You remember teaching that expression to recruits on colder borders, where the air itself seemed to be looking for a reason to hurt you. A memory comes without your permission, as they do. A river somewhere north, hard banks, reeds crushed by boots. A shout, the brief, clean metallic smell when a blade enters flesh, and the world seems, for an instant, extremely simple. It is not guilt exactly that returns with it. It is more like a muscle twitching, long after the blow that trained it. Jerusalem's smells push the memory aside. Baking bread, sheep penned too tight, lamp oil, sweat that has nowhere to go. You pass stalls still shuttered, but there are already people in the street, moving as if pulled by strings. Pilgrims wrapped in travel dust, locals with jars and baskets, boys darting between legs. They look at your standard as if it might suddenly bite. They have reasons to dislike you. You do not need them explained. Each complaint is its own language here, and you have learned enough of it to hear the same word spoken 10 different ways. An old woman mutters something as you pass. You catch only one syllable, sharp like a seed bitten in half. A soldier beside you stiffens, ready to pretend it did not happen in a way that demands you respond. You let it go. Let the sound dissolve into the street. Not everything needs a lesson. Even so, you feel how the city watches, not with one mind, not with one set of eyes, but with 1,000 separate calculations. How many men with him? How tired are they? Does he look ill? Does he look afraid? The last question is always the one they want answered, and you never give it to them. Your escort turns toward the fortress where you keep quarters in the city, a Roman node of stone and routine pressed against the old bones of this place. The streets narrow, and the crowd thickens until it becomes a slow river you must push through. Banga's ears lift and swivel. He reads the city better than your scribes. Above the roofs, the temple rises like a separate weather. Even from here you can feel it. White stone and golden surfaces catching the morning in calm indifference. The sight should be impressive. It is impressive. It is also inconvenient. You are responsible for keeping the peace around that mountain of certainty. It is the festivals that make the day dangerous. On ordinary weeks, unrest is a simmer that can be watched and stirred as needed. But when they come in from the hills, from the farms, from villages that do not see Roman banners every day, their eyes sharpen. Their songs get louder. They pack hope into their throats until it becomes a chant. They press into the city as if they can push the walls outward by force of belief. Belief is an odd thing to govern. You can tax it sometimes. You can ban its symbols and watch it grow stronger in secret. You can kill a man and discover that, inconveniently, death does not always end a story. Rome prefers problems with edges. This land offers problems that leak. You dismount within the courtyard, and the headache pulses once, as if acknowledging the stone. A servant takes your reins. Another brings water. The basin is cool under your hands. You wash slowly. The water turns cloudy with the dust of the road. When you lift your head, your reflection is broken into small pieces by the ripples. It looks less like a face and more like a set of decisions waiting to be made. You dry your hands. You smooth your tunic where it creased beneath the cuirass. Small acts, domestic in their way. They give the morning a boundary. A messenger arrives before you've sat. He is breathless in the controlled manner of a man who has been taught not to appear breathless. He bows, too deeply, as if depth could substitute for good news. From the high priest, he says in Greek, and the words scrape. You have noticed how often men use someone else's authority as a shield. Caiaphas does not write like a man asking for help. He writes like a man reminding you of shared interests. He has kept his position by being useful, and you have kept him there because a stable lever is better than a loose one. You read the letter with the same part of your mind you use to read troop reports. What is being said, what is being demanded, what is being prepared. There is mention of heightened concern among the temple council. There is mention of trouble moving through the crowds like a rumor carried on a sleeve. There is mention, too, of restraint, as if restraint is something you might be tempted to misplace. The name in the letter is not emphasized. It sits there with an odd quietness, like a stone dropped into a bowl of milk. A Galilean, a teacher, a man whose words are making people look at one another differently. You have heard his name in other mouths, in half-sentences exchanged between guards, in the careful tone merchants use when they are checking who is listening. Rumors come to you the way smoke comes, thin at first, then everywhere, and always implying a fire you have not yet seen. Another servant appears, asking whether you will take your morning meal. He says it politely, and you can tell he has been trained to offer bread to men who might order executions by lunchtime. You nod without committing. Hunger is an option. Pain is not. Banga lies down near the doorway, enormous head on his paws, eyes open. He watches the messenger with a calm that feels like judgment. Dogs are honest creatures. They do not pretend that fear is respect. You cross the room and stand near the window. Outside, Jerusalem continues its morning work. A vendor calls out. Somewhere, a child laughs sharply and is hushed. Farther off, the temple courts are already filling, as if the day's purpose is gathering itself like water behind a dam. You press 2 fingers to the bridge of your nose, where the headache roots itself. The pressure brings brief relief. It also brings the thought you always avoid, that you have made enemies here without meaning to, simply by being present with Rome's symbols on your shoulders. You remember the time you brought in standards with images they could not bear to see. You remember the night arguments, the morning faces, the stubborn refusal to disperse until you relented. The city can be quiet for days, then suddenly unquiet in a way that feels rehearsed. There is a kind of comedy in it, if you allow yourself to see it. An empire that can move legions across continents, brought to a halt by a picture on a piece of cloth. Men who have watched rivers run red, forced to negotiate with priests who will not step into your hall because of dust on a threshold. And you, in the middle, obliged to be practical about the impossible. A knock comes at the door again, not a servant this time, a soldier's fist, firm, businesslike. "Prefect," the voice says, "the city is waking faster than usual." You do not answer immediately. You look once more at the pale stone outside. at the moving heads in the street. You feel the weight of the day settling onto your shoulders with a familiar steadiness, like armor. You turn from the window, and Banga lifts his head as if he has been waiting for that decision. Let them wake, you say, and even your own voice sounds slightly distant to you, like it belongs to the room rather than the man. We will be here when they do. Chapter 2. The Weight of Names. The first hours of the day arrive in small, manageable pieces. A seal pressed into wax, a cup set down too loudly, a sandal scuffing stone in the corridor beyond your door. The headache does not leave. It changes its posture. It sits deeper now behind the right eye, as if it has found a chair. When you blink, light catches on the edge of pain and makes a thin white thread across your vision. You keep your face still. A governor can look tired, but not startled. Even the body learns that distinction. A clerk brings a bundle of petitions, thin tablets, folded scraps, strings tied with the kind of care people reserve for requests they already expect to be refused. You open one, then another. The complaints are familiar. A boundary stone moved, a donkey stolen, a brother who refuses to divide an inheritance fairly. The smallest matters always reach you first, as if the city believes it can soften you with its daily inconveniences before it asks for blood. You read the petitions slowly, not because you enjoy them, but because the act of reading is a kind of leash on your thoughts. Each line holds you to the present, to the ink, to the practical world where problems have dimensions and can be pushed aside with a signature. Between letters, you listen. The fortress has its own music. Sandals on stone, metal on metal, a distant call from the watch, the occasional bark from Banga when someone approaches too quickly. In Caesarea, the sound of the sea smooths everything. Here, the city presses its noise right up to the walls, and even your quiet rooms seem to vibrate faintly, like cups set too close to a drum. A servant enters with bread and olives. The olives are too sharp today. They make your mouth water in a way that feels like another sort of pain. You chew anyway. You swallow. The body is a stubborn animal. It keeps demanding its small rituals even when your mind wants to live elsewhere. Banga follows you as you cross to the basin. He moves with the deliberate slowness of a large dog who has learned that doors and furniture are things worth respecting, but only because you have taught him. His nails click once, twice, then stop. He sits where he can watch both you and the room. If the gods wanted you to have a better guard, they would have given you fewer men and more dogs. A centurion arrives to report on the morning patrols. He speaks with the careful flatness of a man trained to make bad news sound like weather. "More pilgrims than expected," he says. "They're sleeping in alleys, on rooftops, anywhere the stones are warm. And the temple, you ask. Full, he says, and filling. You nod as if fullness is an ordinary measurement, like grain in a bin. The centurion continues. There were arguments in the market, a scuffle at a well, a knife drawn, then put away again when the owner saw Roman helmets. It is always like this, a city learning where its own edges are, testing them with fingertips. And the Galileans, you ask, because the letter from Caiaphas has made the word sit in your mind like grit. The centurion shifts his weight. It is a small movement, but it tells you the report has reached the part he would prefer to skip. There's talk, he says. There is always talk. This talk has a name. Names are the only things that travel faster than fear. You watch the centurion's mouth as if the muscles there might betray something he does not want to say. A preacher, he says. From Nazareth, they say, or near it. He's been in the city. Some claim he was seen in the outer courts. Claim, you repeat. It tastes of dust. The centurion nods, relieved to have the word offered to him. Some say he speaks about a kingdom, not like ours. Some say he doesn't call for violence, but people listen. People listen. That is always the danger. Not the words themselves. Words can be as harmless as smoke. But the way they settle into the minds of men who want a reason. You do not ask the name yet. You already know it. Caiaphas's letter has given it a quiet place in your day. But you make the centurion speak it anyway, because hearing something aloud changes it, turns it from a thought into an object you can hold. What do they call him? You ask. The centurion hesitates as if the syllables might stain his tongue. Jesus, he says finally. Jesus of Nazareth. Banga lifts his head at the pause, not at the name. Dogs do not recognize theology. They recognize tension. You keep your expression smooth. Inside, nothing dramatic happens. No omen, no sudden certainty. Only the small annoyance of being asked to manage yet another story. Does he preach against Caesar? You ask. Not directly, the centurion says, or so the men report. It's more parables. He talks and people argue about what he meant. So he lets them do the work, you say, and the corner of your mouth lifts almost imperceptibly. It is not quite amusement. It is recognition. You have known soldiers who won battles by letting the enemy's imagination do most of the fighting. The centurion relaxes a fraction. A prefect who can still make a dry remark is a prefect who has not yet started ordering punishments without trial. You wave him away. When he leaves, the room feels larger. The silence after men speak about trouble always has more space in it than the silence before. You return to the petitions. The ink blurs at the edges when you look too long. You blink it back into focus. A man complains that his neighbor's goat has eaten his herbs. Another asks permission to repair a wall. Another wants an exemption from some duty he insists will ruin his family. You sign. You decline. You pass a few to your secretary with a brief note. Your hand moves steadily, as if your body is willing to do its work, even if your mind has begun to wander toward less orderly things. A breeze enters through the window slit, carrying the smell of smoke and crushed greenery. It also carries voices, distant, indistinct, the city's mouth murmuring to itself. There are moments when Jerusalem seems like one enormous animal, asleep or awake, and you are meant to predict its next movement by the twitch of a street. You think of Caiaphas again. The high priest is a man who understands balance in a way Rome respects. Keep the people quiet. Keep the Romans satisfied. Keep himself alive. He has kept his office through storms by leaning in whatever direction the wind demands. This makes him stable. It also makes him dangerous, because stability in a land like this is often achieved by pushing someone else under the wheel. You also think of Tiberius, far away, in his private world where decisions are made without needing to smell the consequences. A name can travel to him. A complaint can be carried by the right messenger. In these years after Sejanus fell, you have felt the floor under your position become less solid. A chair can be pulled away without warning. A man can be recalled and made an example with nothing more than a scroll and a seal. It would be simpler, you sometimes think, if power were only about strength. But it is also about stories, and who tells them first. A servant brings word the procula is awake. The message is delivered as if your wife is another official matter that must be accounted for. In Jerusalem, even intimacy feels like something the walls might report. You go to her rooms without haste. The corridor is cool. Your sandals make a steady sound. Banga follows, then pauses at a threshold, looking up at you with that expectant patience that is almost reproachful. You motion him in. He enters with you, as if he has been granted permission to share your private burdens. Procula sits near a low table with a lamp still lit, though the sun is up. The flame makes the room smell faintly of oil. Her hair is loose, and there is a crease along her cheek from sleep that has not yet decided whether to vanish. She looks at you as if measuring the day's weight on your face. "You're in pain," she says. It is not a question. She has lived beside you long enough to know the small shifts, the way your eyes narrow when the light is too sharp, the way you hold your jaw when you want to hide something from yourself. "It will pass," you say, because that is what you always say. She nods, not agreeing, simply acknowledging the ritual of the answer. Her hands rest on the table. The fingers are still, but the stillness is too deliberate. "The city is loud," she says. "It is a feast," you reply. "As if the feast explains the noise," she says, and there is the faintest dryness in it. Procula has learned over the years the local habit of speaking around a thing instead of into it. You wonder if that is how the land changes people, quietly, like dust settling into cloth. She looks past you for a moment, toward the slit of window where sunlight makes a hard line on the floor. "There is a name being said," she murmurs. You feel the headache sharpen slightly, as if your body has its own opinion about names. "A preacher," you say. "One more." Procula's gaze returns to you. "They say he heals," she says, and her voice keeps the word "they" at a careful distance, as if she is lifting something unpleasant with a cloth. "You have been listening to servants," you say, and the remark is mild, but it carries a warning. You do not need stories brought into your household with the morning bread. She gives a small, tired smile. "The servants listen to the city," she replies. "The city speaks through them whether I ask or not." You want to dismiss it. You almost do. A healer, a teacher, a rumor. You have governed through worse. Yet you find you are picturing a crowd gathered in a courtyard, not violent, simply intent. The kind of intent that can become anything, depending on who touches it next. Banga lies down near Procula's chair with a heavy sigh, as if he too finds human talk excessive. His eyes close halfway. He looks like a creature practicing indifference. You stand there a moment longer than necessary, because leaving the room would mean returning fully to the day waiting outside. Inside, the air is still, and the lamp's small flame makes a soft, predictable sound. You can almost believe the city beyond the walls is not swelling toward some decision. Procula watches you as if she might say more, but she does not. She lets the silence do its work. It is a kind of restraint you admire, even if you do not call it that. You turn to go. In the corridor, the fortress noise returns. Boots, voices, the click of armor. Somewhere beyond the walls, the temple courts fill further. Somewhere in that mass of bodies, the name continues to move from mouth to mouth, light as breath and heavy as consequence. By the time you reach your own chamber again, you realize you have begun to do what you always do when trouble takes the shape of a story. You have started to decide how much of it you can afford to believe. Chapter 3. The city breathes. The day advances by inches rather than hours. Light shifts across stone, pauses, then shifts again, as if the sun itself is uncertain how much attention to give this place. You sit through audiences that blur at the edges. A delegation from the western quarter complains about soldiers blocking a side street. You remind them, gently, that the street was never theirs to begin with. A merchant from Tyre wants permission to move goods through the city after sunset. You deny it. He bows too quickly, already rehearsing his grievance for a different ear. Between each encounter, the headache presses, releases, presses again. It has its own rhythm, independent of the petitions and the bowing men. You have learned not to fight it. Resistance only sharpens its interest in you. From the open window, the city exhales. Sound rises and falls without pattern, a chant that never quite becomes a song. The bark of a vendor, the clang of metal struck accidentally and then deliberately repeated, as if the accident had been an idea. Somewhere, a horn answers another horn. The notes overlap and cancel each other out. A scribe reads aloud a report you have already read twice. His voice is careful, shaped by years of knowing when not to emphasize a word. You let him finish anyway. Sometimes letting a man complete a useless task is the least cruel thing you can do. When he leaves, the room holds the faint echo of his voice. Then nothing. You rub your temples. The stone beneath your fingers is cool. It helps. Your mind drifts, not to the Galilean himself. There is still too little substance there, but to the shape of rumor. Rumor has a temperature. It begins warm, almost pleasant, something shared. Then it cools as it spreads until it can be handled without discomfort. And finally it turns cold, sharp enough to cut. You have seen this pattern often enough to recognize the first stage. You have never found a reliable way to stop it before the last. A guard appears at the doorway, waiting for acknowledgement. His posture tells you he carries information rather than a request. "Speak," you say. "There was a gathering near the sheep gate," he reports. "No violence, just listening." "To whom?" He hesitates, then answers as if the words might rearrange themselves if he delays. "Not the Galilean, others. Talking about him." You nod. It is almost worse that way. When people speak in another man's absence, they are free to improve him. "Did they disperse?" you ask. "Yes, when patrols passed." "And after?" "They gathered again," he says. "Somewhere else." You wave him away. There is nothing to be done with this information yet. It is like being told the tide is moving. You already know. Banga stirs at your feet, shifting his weight, then settling again. His presence is grounding. He understands waiting in a way men rarely do. You rise and cross the room, stopping before the window. From here, the city looks almost gentle. Roof lines soften in the light. Smoke thins as cooking fires burn down. The temple gleams, unchanged, uninterested in your concerns. You remember another city once, far from here, where unrest took a different form. There, anger arrived openly, like weather you could see coming. Men shouted, banners appeared. Someone threw a stone. It had been crude, but honest. You had known exactly where to stand. Here, everything is layered. Polite faces over clenched teeth. Ritual over resentment. The land teaches patience because impatience gets you killed. A messenger arrives from Caiaphas in the early afternoon. This one is older, his hair graying at the temples, his robe arranged with care. He bows correctly, not too low, not too quick. He has delivered difficult messages before. The high priest sends his greetings, he says, and you almost smile at the formula. And his concerns, you reply. Yes, the messenger agrees. He produces a small scroll. You do not take it immediately. You let him hold it out, arm extended until the weight becomes awkward. Power is sometimes simply the ability to delay. When you finally take the scroll and read, there is nothing overtly alarming. Concerns about the crowds, requests for increased patrols near the temple courts, a reminder of shared responsibility for public order. And then, carefully placed, almost as an afterthought, a mention of doctrinal confusion spreading among the people. The phrasing is elegant. It manages to sound both vague and urgent. You hand the scroll back without comment. "Does the high priest wish me to arrest confusion?" you ask mildly. The messenger allows himself a small, strained smile. He trusts your judgment. Judgment. The word lingers after the man leaves, heavier than it ought to be. You sit again, suddenly tired. Not physically, your body still holds itself like a soldier's, but in the way that comes from watching the same patterns repeat without variation. Men gather, words are spoken. Fear grows bored and looks for novelty. Someone must decide where the line is drawn. A servant brings water. You drink. It tastes faintly of limestone. You set the cup down and watch the surface still. As the afternoon wanes, the light shifts toward gold. Shadows lengthen. The city does not quiet. It only changes its voice. The chants grow more confident. The laughter becomes sharper. The pauses between sounds stretch, as if everyone is listening for something they cannot name. You think of Procula again, of the way she said the city is loud, as if volume itself were a warning. She has always been attentive to atmosphere. In Caesarea, she can predict a storm before the sky darkens, simply by the way the air settles. You wonder what she senses now. A knock at the door interrupts the thought. This time it is a junior officer, young enough that his armor still looks new. He salutes with unnecessary precision. "Prefect," he says, "there are men arguing near the lower market. One claims the Galilean spoke of a temple not made by hands." "Did he?" you ask. The officer flushes slightly. "I don't know, sir. That's what's being said." What else is being said? That he speaks in riddles, that he refuses titles, that he eats with the wrong people. You snort softly before you can stop yourself. The officer looks startled, unsure whether he is offended. "That last charge alone," you say, "has ruined more men than rebellion ever did." The officer smiles uncertainly, relieved to have the tension eased. You dismiss him. When the door closes, the room feels smaller. The air is warm now, heavy with late-day smells. You loosen the fastening at your collar and immediately regret it. The headache takes the opportunity to remind you it is still present. You close your eyes briefly, not to rest. Sleep in daylight is a concession you avoid, but to let the darkness press back against the brightness. In the dark, memories come more easily. A campfire once, long ago. Men speaking in low voices, telling stories about home. Someone laughed at the wrong moment. Someone else threw a piece of bread. It had seemed important then, that small social correction. You had learned early how easily order slips when men believe themselves unseen. You open your eyes. The city is still there. The temple still shines. The rumors still move, invisible and persistent. By evening, the fortress is on alert. Not formally, not yet, but in the way men carry themselves when they expect a night to go badly. Extra torches are lit. Patrols double back on their own routes. The air hums with unspoken contingency. You stand at the window again, watching the last of the sun leave the stone. Below, a group of pilgrims passes, singing softly. The melody is unfamiliar, but the emotion is not. It is hope mixed with strain, a sound you have heard before battles. For the first time that day, you allow yourself to think the thought you have been circling. If the Galilean is nothing, he will vanish on his own. If he is something, someone else will decide what that means. The trouble, you know, is that men rarely wait for clarity. They act while meaning is still fluid, while responsibility can be shared or denied. The city breathes in. You feel it, like pressure against the chest. Somewhere beyond the walls, night gathers itself, and you understand, with the dull certainty that settles before difficult days, that tomorrow will ask for more than observation. Chapter 4. Night Watch. Night does not fall here so much as accumulate. It gathers in corners first, in the hollows between buildings, under steps worn smooth by generations of feet. Then it settles into streets, filling them until the lamps look like small concessions rather than claims. From your rooms you watch the process without comment. Watching is one of the few actions that costs nothing and still feels like work. The fortress changes character after dusk. Voices drop, laughter thins. Even the men who enjoy night duty stop enjoying it quite so openly. Torches flare and gutter in the slight breeze, their smoke curling back toward the stone as if uncertain where it belongs. Banga stands beside you, head level with the window ledge. His ears tilt forward, then relax. He smells what you cannot, layers of human intention carried on cooling air. Fear has a scent. So does anticipation. Dogs do not confuse the two. You turn from the window and sit. The chair is solid, familiar. Its arms have been worn smooth by men who rested their weight there, and then rose to make decisions they would later explain as necessary. You let your hands lie still. You have learned that stillness is sometimes the only way to keep the mind from inventing urgency. A report arrives from the evening patrols. You listen without interrupting. No arrests, no blood. A near fight dissolved when a patrol appeared. Someone shouted something about kingship. Someone else laughed too loudly. The laughter had sounded false. Did anyone speak the Galilean's name, you ask? Yes, the officer says. Often. Did anyone claim to speak for him? No. That is almost reassuring. Almost. When the officer leaves, you remain seated, looking at nothing in particular. The lamp throws a pool of light onto the table. Beyond it, the room fades into shadow. You think of how often decisions are made in that lighted space, as if illumination itself confers correctness. You rise and pace slowly. The movement eases the pressure in your head, though it never quite leaves. You think again of the Galilean, though you still refuse him a face. A rumor without features is easier to manage. Faces invite sympathy, and sympathy complicates administration. Somewhere deeper in the fortress, a door closes. The sound echoes longer than it should. You pause, listening. Nothing follows. The city beyond the walls murmurs, then quiets, then murmurs again. It is like listening to a sleeper who cannot quite settle. A servant brings wine. You accept it, though you do not drink immediately. The cup is cool. The surface of the liquid reflects the lamp's flame, elongated, unsteady. You swirl it once, gently, and watch the reflection distort. Truth, you think briefly, probably behaves the same way under motion. You drink. The wine is thin, local, meant more for habit than pleasure. It warms your throat and does nothing else. You set the cup aside. Time stretches. You consider writing a reply to Caiaphas, then decide against it. Silence, for now, says enough. Let him wonder what weight you give his concerns. Your thoughts drift, uninvited, to Procula. She has not sent for you again, which means she is either sleeping or thinking. You are not sure which worries you more. When she dreams, she does so with an intensity that seems disproportionate to the act. She wakes carrying things other people would have shaken off. You tell yourself that dreams are only the mind arranging scraps. You have had enough of them yourself to know how convincing nonsense can feel in the dark. And yet, you push the thought away and return to pacing. Bunga follows at a respectful distance, matching your turns with a patience that borders on irony. He does not question where you are going because he knows you are not going anywhere. Another hour passes. The lamp burns lower. Outside, a sudden shout breaks the relative quiet. You stop, listening. It is answered by another voice, then another. The sounds move not toward the fortress but away, dissolving into the city's maze. A runner appears moments later, breath quick, eyes bright. "Nothing, sir," he says before you ask. "Just an argument. Drunk pilgrims." "Pilgrims are rarely drunk," you say. The runner hesitates. "Excited, then." You wave him away. When the door closes, you exhale slowly. Excitement is more dangerous than wine. Wine wears off. You return to the window. The moon has risen, pale and indifferent. Its light flattens the city, turning roofs and streets into a map rather than a place. From here, it almost looks manageable. You remember another night, years ago, standing watch in a foreign camp. The men had been restless then, too. There had been talk of an attack that never came. By morning, everyone had felt foolish. By the next night, the talk returned, sharpened by the memory of having been wrong before. It had ended badly, not because the enemy was strong, but because fear had grown bored of waiting. You press your fingers to your temples again. The stone is cool. You hold there until the pulse eases. A soft sound behind you makes you turn. Procula stands in the doorway, wrapped in a light cloak. She has not arranged herself formally. Her hair is loose again, catching the lamplight. She looks smaller at night, as if the day lends her some of its authority. "You're still awake," she says. "So are you." She steps into the room, closing the door partway behind her. The fortress noises dim slightly, as if respecting the partial barrier. Banga rises and approaches her, sniffing her hand briefly before sitting again. He accepts her presence without ceremony. "I couldn't sleep," she says. "The city won't let me." "It does that," you reply. She looks at you, then at the window. "It feels crowded," she says, searching for the word. "Even in the dark." "That's the festival." "Yes," she says, but the word does not satisfy her. She moves closer, stopping near the table. Her fingers brush the edge of the wood, tracing a groove worn by use. "There's talk among the women," she says quietly. You do not ask which women. In a city like this, information travels in channels men rarely consider. "They say this teacher was seen leaving the temple," she continues, "that he didn't raise his voice, that he looked tired." "Tired," you repeat. She nods, as if he carries something heavy but doesn't complain about it. You feel a flicker of irritation, not at her but at the detail. Tiredness is disarming. It suggests humanity where you would prefer abstraction. "People project what they need," you say. "Yes," she agrees too quickly. "That's what frightened me." Banga lies down near Procula's chair with a heavy sigh, as if he too finds human talk excessive. His eyes close halfway. He looks like a creature practicing indifference. You stand there a moment longer than necessary, because leaving the room would mean returning fully to the day waiting outside. Inside, the air is still, and the lamp's small flame makes a soft, predictable sound. You can almost believe the city beyond the walls is not swelling towards some decision. Procula watches you as if she might say more, but she does not. She lets the silence do its work. It is a kind of restraint you admire, even if you do not call it that. You turn to go. In the corridor, the fortress noise returns, Boots, voices, the click of armor. Somewhere beyond the walls, the temple courts fill further. Somewhere in that mass of bodies, the name continues to move from mouth to mouth, light as breath and heavy as consequence. By the time you reach your own chamber again, you realize you have begun to do what you always do when trouble takes the shape of a story. You have started to decide how much of it you can afford to believe. Chapter 5. Before Sleep. Sleep does not arrive all at once. It approaches, pauses, tests the ground, then retreats again when it finds the mind still awake. You lie on your back, hands folded loosely over your chest, listening to the fortress settle. Stone cools, voices thin and finally fade. Somewhere down the corridor, a man clears his throat and then thinks better of speaking. The night watch takes over from the day with the same careful solemnity, as if the hours themselves might notice disrespect. Your headache has receded to a distant throb, present but no longer demanding. Pain, like authority, becomes easier to bear when it stops insisting on being acknowledged. Procula's breathing reaches you from the other side of the room. It is steady now. She has found sleep at last, or something close enough to pass for it. You do not turn to look at her. The sound is enough. Turning would feel like checking whether something fragile has broken. Banga lies at the foot of the bed, an enormous, reassuring weight. Every so often his paws twitch, chasing something only he can see. You wonder, briefly, whether dogs dream with the same burden people do, or whether their dreams are lighter, made of simpler materials, running, warmth, the absence of hunger. You close your eyes. At first, there is only darkness, textured by the faint glow of memory. The city's sounds echo briefly, then dissolve. The mind begins its familiar work of sorting, discarding the trivial, rearranging the rest into shapes that might be useful later. You see the temple again, its pale mass rising above the city. In your mind, it is neither beautiful nor offensive. It is simply there, immovable, certain. You have always been wary of certainty in others. It leaves little room to maneuver. A thought drifts in, uninvited. What if the Galilean is only tired, as the women say? What if all of this noise has gathered around a man who would rather be elsewhere? You almost laugh silently at the idea. The world does not bend itself into knots for tired men. It reserves that effort for symbols. Sleep edges closer. The darkness thickens. You feel your body loosen, muscles releasing their small habitual tensions. This is the dangerous moment when memories slip their leashes. You are younger. The air is colder. There is frost on the ground, and your breath makes clouds you cannot control. Men move around you, stamping their feet, muttering. Somewhere beyond the line of trees, something waits. You cannot see it, but you know it is there. Waiting always feels intentional. An order is given. You cannot recall the words, only the tone. It is decisive, meant to sound calm. You obey. Everyone does. That is how the night learns what kind of man it contains. The memory does not end with violence. It never does. It ends with aftermath, silence, the heavy quiet that follows action. You remember standing still, your hands feeling strange, as if they belonged to someone else. You remember thinking with mild surprise that the world had not ended when it should have. You shift slightly on the bed. Banga grunts, adjusts, then settles again, pressing one solid paw against your ankle. The weight grounds you. The memory loosens its hold. Another thought takes its place, gentler but no less persistent. Caiaphas's letter, the careful language, the way concern was shaped into expectation. You have worked with men like him before, men who believe stability is achieved by removing whatever disturbs the surface, regardless of what churns beneath. You consider what tomorrow might bring. Another report, another delegation, perhaps nothing at all. Perhaps the Galilean will leave the city quietly, his name dissolving into the next rumor, replaced by something new. The thought brings a brief, unwelcome relief. Sleep finally takes hold, but lightly, as if it intends to remain alert. Images pass without sequence. A street you do not recognize. A voice speaking too softly to hear. A hand raised, not in threat, but in explanation. You try to listen, but the words slide away before they can settle. Then the dream sharpens. You are standing in a courtyard washed in early light. The stone beneath your feet is warm, though the air is cool. You are alone, and yet you are not. There is a sense of presence, calm and unwavering, like a gaze that does not blink. A man stands before you. His face is indistinct, as if the dream refuses to commit to details. What you notice instead is his posture, upright without effort, unguarded. He does not look at you with fear or expectation. He looks as if he has been waiting. You feel the familiar pressure behind your eyes, stronger here, as if the headache has followed you into sleep. You want to speak, to ask the questions that come naturally to men in authority. Who are you? What do you want? Who sent you? But your mouth will not open. The man speaks instead. His voice is quiet, almost conversational, and yet it carries without effort, filling the space between you. It is difficult to rule people, he says. The statement is neither accusation nor comfort. It is an observation, offered without ceremony. You feel an unexpected irritation at its accuracy. You try again to speak. The words gather, then scatter, like birds startled from a branch. The man tilts his head slightly, as if listening to something you cannot hear. For a moment, you think he might smile, but the expression never quite forms. "You have a headache," he says. The simplicity of it unsettles you. In the dream, the pain flares, sharp and immediate, as if acknowledged. You reach up instinctively, pressing your fingers to your temple. "Yes," you manage to say, and the sound of your own voice feels strange, too loud in the open space. The man nods, as if this confirms something. "You should walk less in the sun," he says, "and avoid the smell of roses." The advice is absurd. There are no roses in the courtyard, and yet the words lodge in you, stubborn and specific. You want to ask how he knows. You want to ask why he cares. Before you can, the light shifts. The courtyard fades at the edges, dissolving into shadow. The man remains steady until even he begins to blur. "Wait," you say, or think you say. It is hard to tell in dreams where thought ends and speech begins. He looks at you then, truly looks, and there is something in his gaze that makes your chest tighten. Not fear, not reverence, but recognition, as if he sees you without the trappings you rely on, without the armor of role and habit. "What is truth?" you ask, the question rising unbidden, as if it has been waiting longer than you have. The man does not answer. Instead, the sound of a voice cuts through the dream. Procula's voice, sharp with urgency. You wake with a start. The room is dark. The lamp is extinguished. Banga is on his feet, ears forward, alert. Procula is sitting up beside you, one hand gripping your arm hard enough to leave marks. Her face is pale, eyes wide, as if she has run a great distance without moving. "I dreamed," she says. The word lands between you, heavy and unavoidable. Outside, the city stirs, restless even in the deep night. Somewhere a horn sounds briefly, then falls silent. You sit there, heart still racing, the echo of the dream clinging to you like a scent you cannot shake. And before you can ask what she saw, you know, with a clarity that feels almost cruel, that sleep has finished with you for the night. Chapter 6. The Message in the Dark. Procula does not release your arm at once. Her fingers remain where they are, pressing into the skin as if to confirm you are solid, present, awake. The pressure is not painful, but it is precise. You notice details like that more at night. "I dreamed," she repeats, quieter now, as if lowering her voice might keep the thing contained. You sit up fully. The room reasserts itself. Stone walls, the low outline of furniture, the faint seam of moonlight at the window. Banga stands between the bed and the door, body angled protectively, tail still. He has learned which moments matter. Tell me, you say. She draws a breath that sounds practiced, as though she has already rehearsed the telling and knows it will not improve with delay. I was standing in a crowd, she says, not close, watching from the edge. There was shouting, but it came and went like waves. And then there was silence. You know better than to interrupt. Some stories require their own pace. There was a man, she continues. He was bruised, not badly, enough to notice, enough to wonder how it happened without anyone admitting to it. You feel the headache stir, responding to the word bruised with professional curiosity. Violence has taught you to read bodies the way priests read entrails. He looked at me, she says, and her voice falters for the first time. Not as if he could see me, as if he knew I was there. A familiar irritation rises in you, at dreams, at their insistence on borrowing the authority of certainty. You keep it in check. This is not the moment to be Roman about it. What did he say? You ask. He didn't, she says. Not to me. He spoke to you. The room seems to tighten slightly, as if the walls have leaned in. What did he say to me? You ask. She closes her eyes. For a moment you think she might refuse to answer, as if the words themselves are too sharp to handle again. He said you would be tired, she says, that you would not sleep, that your head would ache because you walk under too much light. The absurd specificity of it lands with more force than any prophecy. You almost laugh, then stop when you realize your mouth has gone dry. And then, you ask. He said you were afraid of losing something, she says, but not what you think. Fear is a common enough dream ingredient. You file it away where it belongs. And what did you think I was afraid of? You ask. She opens her eyes and looks at you steadily. He didn't say, she replies. He just looked at you, as if the answer wasn't interesting to him. Silence settles between you. It is not dramatic. It is simply thorough. Banga shifts, nails clicking once on the stone. He glances back at you, then at Procula, then returns his attention to the door, satisfied that nothing immediate threatens. Procula releases your arm at last. The skin tingles where her fingers were. You rub it absently, more out of habit than need. It was only a dream, you say, because saying it aloud gives the sentence a chance to work. Yes, she agrees. That's what frightened me. You swing your legs off the bed and stand. The floor is cool under your feet. The movement steadies you. Authority often lives in the body before it reaches the mind. You cross to the window and look out. The city is quieter now, but not asleep. A few lamps still burn. A torch moves along a wall, its bearer unseen. The temple is a pale shape against darker stone, present even when it cannot be seen clearly. Behind you, Procula speaks again. "He was innocent," she says. The word arrives without embellishment. It does not argue. It states. "Innocent of what?" you ask without turning. She hesitates. "I don't know," she admits. "But it mattered. That was clear." You rest your forehead briefly against the cool stone of the window frame. The contact is grounding. It also reminds you of other windows, other nights, when certainty felt less complicated. Dreams borrow our words, you say. They use them carelessly. "Yes," she replies, "but sometimes they return them changed." You turn then. In the dim light, her face looks drawn, older than it did in the morning. Jerusalem does that to people. It compresses time. "What do you want me to do?" you ask. She looks at you as if the question itself is a misunderstanding. "I want you to have nothing to do with him," she says. The phrasing is precise. Not protect him, not help him. Simply do not touch. You feel the tension settle into your shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. There are many things a prefect can avoid. There are fewer he can pretend not to see. "I cannot promise that," you say. "I know," she replies. "That's why I'm asking." You do not answer. Promises made under duress have a way of becoming accusations later. She watches you for a moment longer, then nods, as if accepting the limit of what can be said. She returns to the bed and lies down, turning onto her side. Within minutes, her breathing deepens again. Sleep, apparently, is willing to forgive her urgency. You remain standing. The night has cooled further. The headache has returned, dull but insistent, as if offended by having been mentioned without consent. You consider calling for a physician, then dismiss the idea. He would offer the same advice as always, delivered with the same hopeful seriousness. Fewer hours in the sun, less wine, more rest. None of it applicable. You dress quietly. The tunic settles over your shoulders with practiced ease. You slip your feet into sandals and tie them without looking. Banga watches, tail giving one slow sweep against the floor. He knows this ritual. It means movement, but not departure. You step into the corridor. The guards straighten, startled but respectful. A prefect awake in the deep night is either ill or expecting something. "I'm walking," you say before they can ask. "Here." They exchange glances, then fall in at a distance, careful not to crowd you. You move through the fortress slowly, letting the cool air clear your head. Stone holds the night differently than earth. It gives back cold without commentary. At a turn in the passage, you stop and lean against the wall. The headache pulses. You press 2 fingers to your temple, just as the man in the dream did. The thought irritates you enough to help. The pain eases slightly. A young guard shifts his weight nearby. You can feel his attention hovering, uncertain. "Sir," he asks. "Speak." "There are priests waiting," he says, "at the outer gate." You close your eyes briefly. "At this hour?" "Yes." "How many?" "Enough." That is a priestly number. It suggests urgency disguised as propriety. You straighten. The wall leaves a chill against your shoulder blades that you will feel later. "Tell them I will see them at first light," you say. The guard hesitates. "They said it concerns the Galilean." "Of course it does. Everything does," you reply. He waits, then nods and departs. You remain where you are, listening to the night reclaim its earlier stillness. Somewhere in the city, a rooster calls too early, then stops, embarrassed. You almost smile. When you return to your rooms, Bongo rises to follow, then lies down again when you stop. He accepts delay without complaint. You sit in the chair by the window and let the hours thin. Dawn will come whether invited or not. With it will come petitions, accusations, faces you will be expected to read correctly on the first attempt. You think again of the man in the dream, of the way he spoke of difficulty as if it were simply a shared fact, not a failure. It is nearly morning when you realize that Procula's dream has done something inconvenient. It has made you curious. And curiosity, you know, has a way of involving itself. Chapter 7. First Light. Dawn arrives without ceremony, a thin seam of gray that widens until the city's edges become legible again. You have not slept. The night has thinned you out, leaving you alert in the way that comes from endurance rather than rest. The headache lingers, quieter now, like a subordinate who has learned when not to speak. You accept it. There are worse companions. From the window, you watch Jerusalem reassemble itself. Doors open, fires are coaxed back to life. A woman shakes out a cloth from a rooftop, sending a small cloud of dust into the air. Somewhere below, a man coughs, then laughs at himself for it. The city pretends for a few minutes that today is like any other. Banga stretches and rises, his joints cracking softly. He pads to your side and looks out with you, head tilted slightly, as if evaluating the morning's worth. He seems satisfied enough to stay. A servant brings water, another brings bread. You eat mechanically, not because you are hungry, but because the day will be easier if your body cannot complain. The bread is coarse. It scrapes the roof of your mouth in a way that feels almost purposeful. The priests arrive as promised, or rather as threatened. They wait in the outer courtyard, careful not to cross thresholds that would inconvenience them later. You do not hurry. Let them rehearse their expressions. Let impatience sharpen their arguments. When you finally step into the space they occupy, the change in the air is immediate. They bow, not deeply, not sincerely, but with the practiced precision of men who know exactly how much respect to display to someone they intend to pressure. "We thank you for seeing us so early," one of them says. "You woke early," you reply. "That's not the same thing." A ripple passes through them. Annoyance, amusement, something else. They are men accustomed to being listened to. Resistance irritates them in small, technical ways. "There is a matter that cannot wait," another says. "For the good of the people." The phrase has been polished smooth by overuse. "You have many matters," you say. "Which one threatens the sun's schedule?" They exchange glances. Finally, Caiaphas steps forward. He does not waste time with pleasantries. He never has. "The Galilean," he says. You nod once. Acknowledgement without commitment. "He is disturbing the people," Caiaphas continues. "Not with weapons, with words." "Words are cheaper," you say. "Not here," he replies. "Not now." You study him. His face is composed, but there is a tightness around his eyes that betrays urgency. Caiaphas understands crowds as well as you do. He understands when they begin to move without permission. "What do you want from me?" you ask. Caiaphas does not answer immediately. He lets the silence stretch, inviting the other priests to feel its weight. Then he speaks. "He should be questioned," he says, quietly, before the day grows loud. You consider the phrasing. Questioned is a flexible word. Quietly is an aspiration rather than a plan. "By whom?" you ask. "By us," Caiaphas says, "but under your authority." There it is. Shared responsibility, carefully arranged so that blame can be distributed later. "And if you find him unsatisfactory?" you ask. Caiaphas's expression does not change. "Then we will bring him to you," he says, "as the law requires." You almost admire the restraint. Almost. "You are concerned about order," you say. "Yes." "And truth?" Caiaphas looks at you, puzzled for a fraction of a second. "Truth," he repeats. "It's a word that gets used," you say. "I like to know what people mean by it." Caiaphas smiles then, thin and professional. "Truth," he says, "is what keeps the people from tearing one another apart." A practical answer. A Roman answer, even if he would never admit it. You nod. "Very well," you say. Question him. Relief moves through them, contained but unmistakable. Caiaphas bows again, deeper this time. "We will act swiftly," he says. See that you do, you reply. Jerusalem dislikes waiting. They withdraw, robes whispering against stone. When they are gone, the courtyard feels larger, emptier. You remain standing, looking at the space they occupied, as if it might offer something else now that they have taken their demands with them. A centurion approaches. Sir, he says, the crowds are growing. Of course they are. They're speaking his name openly now. You nod. Names, once spoken openly, have already crossed their first boundary. Keep patrols visible, you say, but light. Let them feel seen, not threatened. The centurion salutes and departs. You return to your rooms and sit. The chair receives you without comment. Banga settles at your feet, content. You think of Procula's words, have nothing to do with him. You think of Caiaphas's certainty. You think of the dream of a man who spoke of difficulty as if it were simply weather. The day stretches ahead, already weighted with expectation. Somewhere in the city, the Galilean is being led through narrow streets, watched by eyes that are deciding what they want him to be. You tell yourself, firmly, that this is still only rumor arranging itself into procedure. And yet, as the light strengthens and the city's voice rises, you feel the quiet certainty that something has already shifted. Not in the streets, in you. Chapter 8. Procedures. The morning settles into formality, which is to say, it begins to disguise its urgency as routine. You sign 2 orders you would have signed on any other day. One concerns grain storage near the lower quarter. The other approves a minor repair to a section of wall that no longer serves any defensive purpose. The ink dries quickly in the strengthening light. Your hand is steady. Anyone watching would conclude that the day has found its proper shape. Outside, the city refuses to cooperate. Noise presses closer to the fortress. Not louder exactly, but denser, as if the air itself has thickened. You can feel it even when the windows are closed, a vibration that has less to do with sound than with expectation. Men do not yet shout. They talk with intention. That stage always comes first. A clerk reads aloud a list of prisoners held overnight. Petty theft, drunkenness. One man who struck a soldier and now regrets the timing more than the act. You nod where nodding is required. You make a note beside one name, then cross it out. Mercy, like punishment, needs an audience to be effective. Today is not the day for small gestures. Between reports, you wait. Waiting is not inactivity. It is attention held without movement. You have practiced it for years, though no one ever taught it explicitly. Soldiers learn it in camps, governors in provinces like this one. where reacting too quickly can be worse than not reacting at all. A message arrives from the temple mid-morning. Brief, polite, contained. They have him. The phrasing is careful. No name, no accusation, just possession. You set the message down and look at it as if it might change. It does not. Banga lifts his head, sensing the shift in you before you acknowledge it yourself. Not yet, you murmur, though you are not sure to whom. The priests will question him. That was the agreement. Let them exhaust their certainty first. Let them shape their narrative. What they bring to you later will be cleaner for having been handled already. This is not avoidance, you tell yourself. It is procedure. You rise and pace. The room feels smaller now, its corners more present. The headache returns with interest, pressing behind your eyes as if offended by your restraint. You welcome it. Pain keeps you from wandering too far inward. Through the window, you glimpse movement. Groups forming, dispersing, forming again. People are beginning to choose positions, literal and otherwise. A man does not stand in the same place twice unless he expects something to happen there. You think of Caiaphas's face when he said the word questioned, the satisfaction he had not quite concealed. You have seen that look before, usually in officers who believe they have already won. A centurion enters without ceremony. "Sir," he says, "the temple guards have closed off a section of the outer court." "On whose authority?" you ask. "Ours," he replies. "Yours. At least, that's how they're saying it." You exhale slowly through your nose. Shared authority again. Convenient, until it is not. "Any trouble?" you ask. "Not yet, but people are watching." "People always watch," you say. "Keep the soldiers visible, calm." "Yes, sir." When he leaves, you return to the window. A cloud drifts across the sun, dulling the stone. The city looks briefly relieved by the shade. You think of Procula. She has not sent for you again. That is either a kindness or a warning. You decide not to check. Some conversations once begun do not benefit from repetition. Time stretches. The fortress grows warmer. Sweat gathers at the base of your neck. You loosen your collar again, then stop yourself from doing more. Appearances matter, even when no one is looking. Another message arrives. This one is longer, less composed. The questioning has not gone as expected. You read the lines carefully. There are accusations, blasphemy, incitement, dangerous ambiguity. There is also frustration. The man does not defend himself the way they want him to. He answers some questions directly, others not at all. He speaks of things that are not on the list. He refuses to be corrected. You fold the message and place it beside the first. Of course he does. Men who know they are guilty behave in predictable ways. Men who believe they are right do too. It is the ones who seem uninterested in the distinction that cause trouble. Banga rises and stretches again, then presses his head briefly against your knee. It is not comfort, it is contact. You rest your hand on his skull for a moment, feeling the solidity of bone and muscle beneath the fur. You sit. You could refuse to see the man. Let the priests handle it. Let them impose their penalties within the limits allowed. You could accept their conclusions when they are delivered formally, accompanied by enough signatures to distribute responsibility evenly. This would be clean, efficient, defensible. The thought does not satisfy you. Curiosity again, unwelcome and persistent. The dream's residue has not faded. The image of a man speaking quietly about difficulty, about headaches and light, intrudes where it does not belong. You tell yourself this is fatigue, that the night has left you susceptible to nonsense, that you have governed too long without rest. And yet, a third message arrives near midday, short, direct. They want a sentence. You do not move for a long moment after reading it. The room is very quiet. Even the city's noise seems to have receded, as if the air itself is waiting to see what you will do. What do they say he has done? You ask, though no one is there to answer. You already know the answer. He has unsettled them. He has refused to be small. He has spoken in ways that make people think they are capable of change. You rub your temples again. The pain responds immediately, bright and focused. You welcome it. Pain is honest. It does not pretend to be principle. A servant appears, hesitant. "Sir," he says, "the crowd is pressing closer." Of course they are. They're asking questions. Questions are allowed, you say. Answers are optional. The servant bows and withdraws. You stand and walk to the door. Banga follows, alert now, reading the shift in your body. You pause with your hand on the latch. For a moment, you consider turning back, sitting down, letting the machinery grind on without your interference. Instead, you open the door. The corridor greets you with its cool breath. Guards straighten. A few glance at you with the kind of interest usually reserved for omens. You nod to them and begin to walk. "Bring him," you say, and the words sound ordinary, which surprises you. You expected them to carry more weight. "To the hall?" someone asks. "No," you reply. "Here." The decision settles as soon as it is spoken. It feels neither right nor wrong. It feels inevitable. As you return to your rooms and wait, The city's voice swells, then steadies, like a crowd sensing movement behind closed doors. You sit once more in the chair by the window. Banga positions himself at your feet, facing the entrance. You are aware, suddenly, of your own breathing. Slow, measured, the kind you practiced on long marches when the body wanted to panic and you refused to let it. Footsteps approach, different from the others, lighter, accompanied by the careful rhythm of men trying not to make noise. You straighten, adjusting the fall of your tunic without looking down. A small, precise act. It gives your hands something to do. The door opens. You do not look up immediately. When you do, you see only that a man has entered, escorted, not dragged. That he stands without resistance, that he does not look at the floor. You register these things without interpretation, the way you have trained yourself to do. There will be time for meaning later. For now you observe and wait for the room to finish changing around him. Chapter 9. The Quiet Presence. The room seems smaller now, though nothing has moved. You notice the man's hands first. They are bound, but loosely, more out of custom than necessity. The rope rests against his wrists without cutting. Someone has judged that force would be excessive. Someone has already adjusted their behavior around him. You do not ask who made that decision. He stands where he has been placed, weight evenly distributed, neither braced nor slack. His tunic is dusty. There is a faint discoloration at the shoulder, the kind left by a hand that gripped and then thought better of it. His face is marked, but not dramatically so. A bruise beginning to yellow, a split lip that has already decided to heal. He looks tired, not exhausted, not broken. Tired in the way men look when they have walked a long distance without complaint. You wait for him to look at you. He does not. Instead, his gaze rests somewhere just to your left, as if the wall itself is worth attending to. It is not avoidance. It is not defiance. It is something more difficult to classify. The effect is unsettling, like speaking to someone who does not need to hear you in order to know you are there. The guards remain near the door, uncertain. They glance at you, then at him, then settle into stillness. Banga lifts his hand, ears forward. He does not growl, he does not retreat. He simply watches. You clear your throat. The sound feels louder than it should. So, you say, and the word lands awkwardly, too informal for the moment, too late to retract. You've been busy. The man turns his head slightly, not fully, just enough to acknowledge that sound has occurred. Yes, he says. The word is plain. It carries no defense, no explanation. It irritates you more than argument would have. You've caused concern, you continue. That tends to happen when crowds gather. Crowds gather, he replies. I do not cause them. You feel the faintest tightening behind your eyes. Not quite pain, not quite interest. His voice is calm, not soothing. Calm in the way water is calm when it knows where it is going. You speak in ways people misunderstand, you say. They misunderstand many things, he says. It is not always the speaker's fault. A flicker of something like amusement passes through you, brief and unwelcome. You suppress it. You've been accused of blasphemy, you say, of claiming authority that is not yours. He considers this. You can see the pause, not hesitation, but attention. He chooses his words as if he is not in a hurry to reach the end of the sentence. Accusations, he says, are a kind of language. Yes, you say, one I'm fluent in. He looks at you then, fully this time. The effect is immediate and physical. Not dramatic, no rush of heat, no sudden fear, but a subtle dislocation, as if something in the room has shifted slightly off its expected axis. His eyes are steady, not intense, not pleading, simply present. You realize, absurdly, that he is studying you the way you study men before deciding whether they are lying. You're in pain, he says. The statement is neither question nor concern. It is delivered with the same tone one might use to note the weather. You almost laugh. Almost. The sound dies in your throat. That's not your concern, you say. No, he agrees. It isn't. The agreement catches you off balance. You had expected resistance, or sympathy, or sanctimony. Instead, you are offered nothing. You gesture to the chair opposite you. Sit, you say. He does not move. I am comfortable, he says. You feel the irritation bloom properly now, sharp and bright. Not because he refuses, but because he refuses without apology. You are in my residence, you say, under my authority. Yes, he says. The word is gentle. It does not challenge. It does not yield. You watch him closely. Most men would use this moment to assert something. Fear, pride, righteousness. He does not. He stands as if sitting or standing are interchangeable details. You understand why you're here, you say. Yes. Then explain it to me. He pauses again. This time the pause feels deliberate, as if he is considering whether the effort will be worthwhile. They are afraid, he says, and you are tired. The headache flares, sharp enough to make your vision narrow. You grip the arm of the chair, steadying yourself. Banga shifts, sensing the change, his body tensing. That's not an explanation, you say. It is, he replies, just not the one you asked for. Silence fills the space between you. It is not empty. It hums faintly like a taut string. You lean back slightly, reassessing. This is not how interrogations go. There is no rhythm you can exploit, no obvious weakness to press. He does not try to win you. He does not try to provoke you. He does not even seem particularly interested in convincing you of anything. Do you claim to be a king? You ask, because the question has been waiting its turn. My kingdom, he says, is not the kind that troubles soldiers. You study him. The phrasing is careful but not evasive. He does not deny the word, he reframes it. If it were, he continues, my followers would be fighting. You glance toward the door, where the guards stand, hands resting near their weapons. They have been alert since he entered, but not threatened. You realize none of them have tightened their grip. That's convenient, you say. Convenience, he replies, is rarely convincing. You feel something like fatigue settle deeper into your bones, heavier than the lack of sleep alone can explain. This conversation is costing you effort in a way most do not. Do you know who I am? You ask. He nods. Yes. And you speak to me like this anyway? Yes. The honesty of it is infuriating. You know I can have you punished, you say. Quietly. Quickly. I know, he says, and you're not afraid. He considers the word. None the way you mean. The room feels warmer. The fortress noises beyond the walls seem distant now, as if the city has leaned away to give this moment space. You rub your temple again. The pain responds, bright and precise. He watches the gesture with interest, not pity. You should rest, he says. There it is again, the absurd advice. The same words from the dream, delivered now without the excuse of sleep. You stare at him. You give orders easily for a man in chains, you say. He looks down at his hands, bound but untroubled. These, he says, are not the kind of chains that matter. You let out a breath you did not realize you were holding. Something in his certainty irritates you profoundly, not because it feels false, but because it feels unearned. Everyone believes something like that, you say, until they don't. He meets your gaze again. Not everyone, he says. The guards shift. One of them clears his throat. The sound seems intrusive, almost rude. You become aware suddenly of time pressing in, of priests waiting, of a crowd gathering strength with every passing minute, of reports that will be written, names that will be mentioned, questions that will be asked later by men who are not in this room and will never care how quietly it happened. You stand. "That's enough," you say. He inclines his head slightly, not a bow, an acknowledgement. As the guards step forward, Banga growls, low, brief, surprised by himself. You glance down at the dog, then back at the man. For the first time since he entered, you see something change in his expression. Not fear, recognition. As if he understands suddenly exactly where this will go, and has understood it all along. You gesture once, sharply. "Take him back," you say. "I'll hear the charges formally." The guards move. The man allows himself to be guided without resistance. At the door, he turns his head just enough to speak again. "You ask about truth," he says softly. "But you already know where it is inconvenient." The door closes behind him. The room exhales. You remain standing, hand still raised from the gesture that ended it. Banga presses against your leg, solid and warm, anchoring you to the floor. Outside, the city's voice swells again, louder now, more confident. You lower your hand. And you understand, with a clarity that does not ask your permission, that this meeting has already cost you more than you intended to pay. Chapter 10. The Return of Noise. The silence he leaves behind does not behave properly. It does not settle. It frays. You lower yourself back into the chair and immediately regret sitting. The room feels too close, its proportions subtly altered, as if the walls have absorbed something and are now deciding what to do with it. You stand again. Movement feels safer. Outside, sound rushes back in, embarrassed by its earlier restraint. Voices overlap, footsteps multiply. Somewhere a chant begins, tentative at first, then steadier, as if relieved to have permission. The city has sensed that something has happened, even if it does not yet know what. Banga stays pressed to your leg. His breathing is even. He has chosen a position and intends to keep it. You cross to the window. From here the courtyard looks crowded in a way it did not moments ago. People stand in clusters that are not quite accidental. Heads tilt toward the fortress. A few men gesture as they speak, hands cutting shapes in the air that suggest conclusions already reached. You touch the stone of the window frame again. It is warmer now. Morning has finished becoming afternoon. A centurion enters without waiting for summons. His face is controlled, but there is a brightness in his eyes that suggests the effort required. "They know," he says. "Know what?" "That he's here, or was." You nod. Information always arrives late, already shaped by anticipation. "The priests are ready," the centurion continues. "They're requesting the formal hearing." "Of course they are." "And the crowd?" You watch a man below raise his arms, not in anger, but in appeal. Others mirror the movement, as if trying it on. They're restless, the centurion says, not violent, yet. You turn from the window. The decision is not urgent. That is what makes it heavy. Urgency is easier. It allows for excuses. Prepare the platform, you say, but keep it simple. The centurion hesitates. Outside? Yes. He nods and leaves, relief evident in the speed of his retreat. Orders are a comfort. They make the future feel narrower. You remain where you are, listening to the city gather itself. The headache has retreated again, offended perhaps by being ignored, or waiting. Pain, like people, does not leave just because it has been dismissed. You think of the man's eyes when he looked at you, not accusing, not pleading, assessing, as if you were the one standing trial, and he were deciding whether to bother listening. The thought irritates you enough to produce a dry, humorless smile. You have stood before tribunals of men who sharpened their questions like knives. You have survived them. This will be no different. And yet, a servant appears, then another. The fortress hums with preparation. Chairs moved, cloth laid out, guards positioned with careful symmetry. Each small act is meant to impose order on a situation that resists it. You wash your hands again. The water is cool, steady. It runs over your fingers and disappears into stone channels, worn smooth by repetition. You dry them carefully, as if attention might substitute for certainty. When you look up, Procula stands in the doorway. She has dressed for the day, her hair arranged, her posture composed. Only her eyes betray the night she has not fully left behind. It's begun, she says. Yes. She steps closer, stopping just inside the room. The noise from outside seems to pull at her attention, then release it again. You saw him, she says. I did. She studies your face, searching for something you cannot name. And? You consider lying. The impulse is brief and passes quickly. Lies require maintenance. He is inconvenient, you say instead. She exhales softly. That's what frightened me. You've already said that. Yes, she replies. But now I know why. She moves closer still, lowering her voice, though there is no one else present. Have nothing to do with him, she says again. The repetition is not nagging. It is insistence. The kind that comes from recognizing a point of no return. I can't promise that, you say again. She nods. I know. She reaches out, hesitates, then places her hand briefly on your forearm. The contact is light, deliberate. It is not comfort. It is recognition. Be careful, she says. I am always careful. She looks at you with something like sadness. No, she says. You're always precise. Before you can respond, she withdraws her hand and steps back. The moment passes as cleanly as it arrived. "I'll wait," she adds, then leaves. You stand alone again. The room seems to release a breath it has been holding. Outside, the chant grows louder. Individual words remain indistinct, but the rhythm is clear. Expectation has found its voice. You adjust your tunic once more, smoothing a crease that no one else would notice. You straighten your shoulders. These are habits formed over years, muscle memory shaped by necessity. The body knows what to do when the mind hesitates. At the door, Banga waits, alert and ready. He glances up at you, then toward the corridor, as if confirming the direction. "Yes," you murmur, and he moves with you. As you step into the corridor, the air changes. It carries heat now and dust, and the faint metallic tang of too many bodies pressed too close together. Guards line the passage, faces set, eyes forward. Some avoid looking at you, others watch too closely. You walk between them at an unhurried pace. Each step feels measured, deliberate. The kind of walking that suggests time is under control, even when it is not. The sound swells as you approach the outer space. The crowd's voice rises and falls, testing itself. When they see you, the noise sharpens, then steadies, as if relieved to have found its focus. You take your place on the platform. Stone beneath your sandals, open air around you. The sky above is pale, uncommitted. Below, faces tilt upward. Some are angry, some hopeful. Most are simply curious. They are people who have come to witness something and do not yet know what that something will be. The priests arrive, arranged, purposeful. Their expressions are composed, but their eyes flick toward the crowd, calculating. And then the guards bring him out. He walks without resistance. The rope is still loose. He looks as he did before, tired, marked, unhurried. He does not search the crowd. He does not look for allies. He looks at you. The city seems to lean in. You feel very clearly now the narrowing of options. The comfortable space of procedure has collapsed into a single point of attention. Whatever happens next will belong to you in a way that cannot be delegated. You raise your hand. The crowd quiets, surprised by its own obedience. "What accusation do you bring against this man?" you ask. The words sound formal, controlled, proper. They also sound to your own ears like the beginning of something you will not be able to stop once it is started. Chapter 11. Accusations. The silence that follows your question is brief, but it stretches. The crowd seems to test it, feeling its edges, before allowing sound back in. Caiaphas steps forward. He has arranged himself for this moment, robe settled, shoulders squared, expression calibrated somewhere between concern and reluctance. He looks like a man performing duty rather than desire. You note the care with which he avoids looking directly at the crowd. "If this man were not a criminal," he says, "we would not have brought him to you." The answer is efficient. It avoids specifics. It shifts weight. "That isn't an accusation," you reply. "It's a conclusion." A murmur moves through the people below, not hostile, not supportive, curious. They lean slightly toward Caiaphas now, waiting to see if he will offer something more substantial. "He incites unrest," Caiaphas continues. "He misleads the people. He speaks against the temple. He teaches," another priest adds quickly, stepping half a pace forward as if afraid the moment might pass, "without authority." You look at the man beside you, the one they are describing as if he were not standing there. He remains still, gaze level, face unreadable. The rope at his wrists has slipped slightly, loose enough that you can see the faint marks where it has rested. "Do you hear these charges?" you ask him. "Yes," he says. "Do you answer them?" He considers this, eyes lifting briefly toward the sky, then returning to you. "Not in the way they want." The crowd reacts to that. Laughter from one corner, irritation from another. Someone shouts a word you cannot quite make out. It does not matter. It carries the sound of allegiance rather than argument. You raise your hand again. The noise settles more slowly this time, as if the crowd is beginning to enjoy itself. "You say he incites unrest," you say to Caiaphas. "Where are his weapons?" "He needs none," Caiaphas replies. "Words are enough." "You said that earlier," you say. "It still isn't evidence." Caiaphas's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. He gestures toward the man. "He calls himself a king." A sharper reaction ripples through the crowd at that. This time the sound has edges. Kings are not theoretical. Kings imply consequences. You turn to the man again. "Do you call yourself a king?" "My kingdom," he says, "is not from this place." The phrasing is careful, but the effect is not. The crowd shifts, unsettled. Some frown, trying to understand. Others nod, satisfied that they already do. "Then you are a king," you say. "You say that I am," he replies. The answer irritates you more than a denial would have. It feels like being handed back your own words and told to examine them. "So you admit it," Caiaphas says, seizing the moment. "I admit nothing that requires your permission," the man says quietly. A hiss of reaction moves through the priests. One of them steps forward too far and is checked by a guard's subtle movement. You feel the headache stir again, not sharply, but with renewed interest. You keep your face neutral. The platform beneath your feet feels suddenly too exposed. You have brought him here for judgment, you say to Caiaphas, under Roman law. Yes. Then let us be precise. You turn to the man once more. Do you oppose Caesar? No. The answer is immediate, unqualified. Do you forbid the payment of taxes? No. That one draws a few surprised sounds from the crowd. Taxes are the one grievance everyone shares openly. Denial here is not what they expected. Then what is it, you ask, that you actually do? He looks at you for a long moment. You feel it, that look. Not pressure, not persuasion, but attention held steady. I speak about what is true, he says. There it is again, the word. It arrives quietly and refuses to behave. And what is truth? You ask before you can stop yourself. The crowd leans in. Even Caiaphas seems momentarily distracted by the exchange, as if he senses something slipping out of his control. The man does not answer, not because he cannot. You are certain of that. He simply does not. The silence stretches again, longer this time. You become acutely aware of your own posture, of the sun on your shoulders, of the way the air seems to vibrate with held breath. You feel the absurd urge to laugh, not from humor, but from the sheer strangeness of standing here, asking philosophical questions, while a city waits to be told whether it should be angry. You straighten. I find no fault in this man, you say. The words are clear. They land where you intend them to. For a heartbeat, there is nothing. Then the priests erupt, not loudly, but urgently, voices overlapping, insisting, recalibrating. He stirs the people. He began in Galilee. He undermines the law. Galilee. The word cuts through the noise cleanly. You lift your hand again. But this time the crowd does not fully quiet. Something has shifted. A name has opened a door you were not planning to use. Galilee, you repeat. Yes, Caiaphas says quickly. That is where he began. You nod slowly. The movement buys you time. It also suggests purpose. Then he falls under another jurisdiction, you say. Send him to Herod. The decision surprises even you. It arrives fully formed, as if it has been waiting for the correct word to justify itself. A ripple of confusion moves through the crowd. Caiaphas hesitates, then recovers. Herod is in the city, he says. Then he will not be inconvenienced, you reply. The man is already being guided away. When he turns his head slightly, meeting your eyes once more. There is no gratitude there, no relief, only the same calm recognition, as if he knows that postponement is not reprieve, as if he knows this will return to you. The crowd's noise swells again as he is led off, louder now, less curious, more invested. They have tasted momentum. You step back from the edge of the platform. The priests regroup, already planning their next appeal. The guards tighten their formation. Banga presses against your leg, solid and present. You rest your hand briefly on his head, feeling the simple certainty of him. You have bought time. You are not sure what you intend to do with it. Above you, the sky remains pale and indifferent, as if nothing of consequence has occurred. But you know better, because even as the noise continues, even as procedure resumes its familiar rhythm, you can feel it. The narrowing. The sense that whatever path you choose next will no longer feel like procedure at all. Chapter 12. The Waiting Space. Time loosens its grip after he is led away. Not in the city. There it tightens, sharpens, begins to pull. But in you. The urgency that carried you through the exchange drains off, leaving something flatter behind. A waiting space. You have occupied it before, between orders given and consequences delivered. The platform empties in stages. The priests withdraw first, displeased but calculating. The crowd thins more slowly, reluctant to abandon the shape the morning has taken. Some linger, talking in low voices, replaying what they heard, improving it. Others drift off, disappointed that the moment did not end decisively. You remain where you are longer than necessary. Guards glance at you, unsure whether to prompt movement. You do not acknowledge them. Authority, like silence, can be extended simply by not ending it. When you finally turn away, the platform feels slightly unreal, as if it belongs to a story that will now be told without you. The corridor receives you again, cooler, darker. The fortress closes around you with familiar indifference. Inside your rooms, the air feels stale. You open the window wider. The city's noise enters immediately, opportunistic, filling the space. You let it. Keeping it out would take more effort than you are willing to spend. Banga circles once, then settles heavily near the chair. He exhales, a deep, contented sound, as if the interruption has passed and order has been restored. You envy him that certainty. You sit. The chair holds you, worn smooth by repetition. You rest your hands on your thighs and notice, idly, that your fingers are marked with ink and dust. The day has left its residue. You think of Herod, of his fondness for spectacle, of the way he collects unusual men the way others collect curiosities. Sending the Galilean to him was not mercy. It was deferral, and you know it. Deferral has always been one of your strengths. A servant enters with water. Another follows with a small dish of fruit you do not remember ordering. You thank them without looking up. They leave quietly, relieved to have done something useful. You drink. The water tastes faintly metallic. You set the cup down and listen to the sounds of the city reshaping itself around the absence of resolution. Expectation does not vanish easily. It looks for a new place to settle. Your headache returns, slow and deliberate, as if reminded of its duties. You press your fingers to your temple and hold them there. The pain responds with familiarity. You have shared enough time together to understand each other's habits. Unbidden, the memory of the man's voice returns, not the words, but the tone, unhurried, as if time itself were something he could afford to waste. You wonder, briefly, what Herod will see when he looks at him. A curiosity, a threat, a disappointment. Herod is a man who prefers his problems entertaining. You imagine the Galilean standing before him, answering questions that are meant to amuse rather than clarify. You imagine the patience required for that. The thought tightens something in your chest that you do not bother to name. A knock interrupts the speculation, firmer than a servant's, familiar. Procula enters. She closes the door behind her without comment and stands near the center of the room, taking in your posture, your expression, the way you have not yet stood to greet her. You sent him away, she says. Yes. To Herod? Yes. She nods, absorbing the information. So he'll come back? Probably. She studies your face, searching again for whatever it is she expects to find there. You found no fault in him, she says. I said as much. That isn't the same thing. No, you agree. She walks to the window and looks out. From here, the city's movement is reduced to pattern rather than noise. She stands very still. They'll push, she says. The priests, they always do. And the crowd, yes. She turns back to you. And you. You lift an eyebrow. I rarely push myself. She almost smiles at that, but the expression fades before it fully forms. You could end this, she says. You consider correcting her, then decide against it. Precision would be dishonest here. I could end something, you say. Not this. She comes closer, lowering her voice as if the walls themselves might object. I don't understand him, she says. But I understand you. That feels like more pressure than accusation. You're standing between two fears, she continues. One of them belongs to Rome. The other belongs to you. You say nothing. She watches you for a moment longer, then sighs. I dreamed again, she says, almost reluctantly. You close your eyes briefly. The light behind them is red, pulsing. He was standing alone, she says. The crowd was shouting, but he wasn't listening. He was looking at you. Your fingers tighten on the edge of the chair. He said nothing, she adds, but it was clear what he wanted. What, you ask? For you to stop trying to disappear. The words settle heavily in the room. That isn't his concern, you say. No, she replies. It's yours. She leaves shortly after, as quietly as she arrived. The door closes with a soft finality that suggests she has said what she came to say, whether it helps or not. You sit alone again. Outside, a new chant rises, different words, same rhythm. Someone has decided what this day should mean, and the city is beginning to agree. A messenger arrives near mid-afternoon, breathless, controlled. Herod has finished, he says. And, you ask? He sent him back. Of course he did. With compliments, the messenger adds, uncertain whether this detail matters. You almost laugh. Almost. Is he injured? You ask. Not seriously. Mocked. Dressed. You nod. Herod's version of judgment. When will he arrive? Soon. You dismiss the messenger and stand. The chair feels heavier when you leave it, as if reluctant to release you. You cross to the window once more. The city's voice swells again, louder than before, more confident. News travels quickly when it confirms what people want to hear. You straighten your tunic, smooth the crease again. This time the gesture does nothing to steady you, because you know now that the deferral has run its course. He is coming back, and when he does, the space for postponement will close. What remains will not be procedure, it will be choice. Chapter 13. The Narrowing. The air changes before he arrives. It thickens, not with heat alone, but with alignment. Sound sharpens. Movement takes on intention. The city has learned which direction to face. You feel it in your body first, in the way your shoulders settle, in the way your breathing becomes more deliberate. The headache retreats again, as if conceding that it will soon be unnecessary. Pain, like hesitation, steps aside when decisions approach. Banga rises before the footsteps are audible. He moves to the doorway and stands there, head lowered slightly, not aggressive, not relaxed. Ready. You remain still. The messenger's words replay themselves with irritating clarity. Mocked, dressed, not seriously injured. The list has the tone of someone describing damage to property rather than flesh. You imagine the garments, bright, absurd, chosen for laughter rather than punishment. Herod's way of touching a thing without holding it. Footsteps approach in the corridor, heavier than before now. More guards, less care taken with quiet. You do not go to the door. When it opens, the sound of the crowd enters with the man, rushing in like water through a breached gate. It presses into the room, filling corners, lingering at the edges. He looks different, not in substance, in emphasis. The robe Herod has given him hangs awkwardly, too fine for the marks on his skin, too deliberate to be accidental. The colour catches the light in a way that draws the eye despite itself. A bruise darkens one cheek now, fresh enough to be honest. His wrists are still bound, though the rope has been adjusted again, as if no one can decide how much restraint is appropriate. He does not look at the guards. He does not look at the crowd beyond the door.
He looks at you. There is no reproach in his expression, no triumph, no disappointment, only patience. The room settles into a strange quiet despite the noise outside, as if something in him dampens the air around him, insisting on a smaller scale. So, you say, and the word feels more appropriate now than it did before. You've been entertained. Yes, he replies. You wait for something else, an elaboration, a remark edged with irony. It does not come. You were sent back, you say. Yes. They found no charge, you continue. They found amusement, he corrects gently. A corner of your mouth tightens. You gesture toward the chair again, the same one you offered before. Sit, you say. This time, he does. The movement is unhurried, unceremonious. He lowers himself into the chair as if it has always been there for him, as if sitting or standing were never the point. The robe pools at his feet, ridiculous and unavoidable. You remain standing. The imbalance irritates you. You do not sit. Outside, the chant swells again, closer now. The words are clearer. A demand is forming its shape. They want an answer, you say. Yes. You've been accused again. Yes. Nothing has changed, you say. No, he agrees. Something has ended. The statement lands quietly, but it settles deep. You pace once, then stop. The room feels even smaller with him seated there, as if the furniture has shifted inward without permission. You understand how this works, you say. Crowds, priests, Rome. Yes. And you still say what you say. Yes. You lean your hand against the table. The wood is warm. The sun has reached this side of the room. You could make this easier, you say, for yourself. He looks at you with mild curiosity, as if examining a familiar object from a new angle. How? He asks. By answering differently, you say. By denying certain words. By explaining yourself. Explaining, he says, tasting the word. To whom? To me, you say, sharper than you intend. He nods slowly. You already understand me as much as you need to. The statement is not arrogant. That is what troubles you. You don't know what I need, you say. I know what you fear, he replies. The crowd outside surges, the sound pressing against the walls like a tide. You hear individual voices now, distinct enough to carry meaning. Names, accusations, demands shaped into rhythm. You step closer to him, lowering your voice, though there is no one else in the room who matters. They will not stop, you say. Not now, not without something given to them. Yes, he says, and I cannot give them nothing. No, he agrees. You wait for him to continue. He does not. You leave me with no good options, you say. He considers this carefully. You leave yourself with them. The irritation flares properly now, hot and bright. You feel it behind your eyes, in your jaw, in the set of your shoulders. You speak as if this is simple, you say. No, he replies. I speak as if it is already happening. You turn away from him and face the window. The crowd below has thickened, faces upturned, expectant. They are no longer curious. They are certain that the day owes them something. A name is being shouted now, not his, yours. You close your eyes briefly. The sound does not fade. When you turn back, he is watching you, not intently, not urgently, simply watching, as if this moment has been placed here for you alone. You know what they want, you say. Yes, and you won't help me give it to them. No. You laugh then, quietly, without humor. The sound surprises you, and for a moment you let it continue, because stopping would require effort you are no longer sure you have. You are not practical, you say. He smiles faintly, not with his mouth, but with his eyes. That is not what you came to ask. The guards shift at the door. One of them clears his throat, then stills himself. Even they seem to sense that interrupting now would be a mistake. You look down at your hands. They are steady. That, too, surprises you. You could walk away, you say, almost to yourself. He shakes his head. That would not help you. The simplicity of the answer feels like an accusation. Outside, the chant sharpens again, louder, more unified. The sound has crossed a threshold. It no longer asks. A servant appears at the doorway, pale, eyes wide. He does not speak. He does not need to. You nod once. Bring him out, you say. The words are clear, final in their movement, if not in their meaning. The guards step forward. The man rises easily, the chair scraping softly against the stone. He does not resist. He does not hurry. As he is guided toward the door, he turns back one last time. You are closer than you think, he says quietly. But you are still afraid of losing. The door opens. The noise pours in. You follow. And as you step into the light, into the sound, into the narrowing space where delay can no longer survive, you understand, with a clarity that feels almost merciful, that the next words you speak will not belong to Rome alone. They will belong to you. Chapter 14. The Choice That Pretends Not to Be One. The platform receives you again, but it no longer feels neutral. Stone underfoot, sky above. These constants now seem staged, as if arranged to give the moment an air of inevitability. The crowd has pressed closer. Faces blur into one another at the edges, but the center holds sharp detail. Eyes lifted, mouths already shaped for response, bodies leaning forward as if the sound alone might pull something loose. The noise does not stop when you appear. It swells, confident now, fed by its own momentum. The crowd knows what a governor looks like when he steps forward to decide. They have seen it before, if not here, then somewhere else. Human behavior travels well. He is brought to stand beside you. The robe Herod gave him glows absurdly in the daylight, its color too vivid, its intention too obvious. The effect is grotesque and faintly comic, and you understand at once why Herod enjoyed it. Mockery is easier when it wears silk. You gesture once, sharply. The soldiers do what they are trained to do. They strike him. Not hard, not enough to satisfy the crowd, enough to mark him, enough to remind everyone that power still knows how to use its hands. The sound is dull, final. His body absorbs it without drama. He stumbles, then steadies himself. Blood appears at the corner of his mouth, bright and immediate. It runs, then slows, as if deciding how much attention to demand. The crowd reacts, not uniformly, but with interest. Some cheer, some wince, most lean forward. You feel nothing like relief. Look at him, you say, and the words come out heavier than you intend. This is the man. The phrase sounds oddly incomplete, as if it belongs to a longer sentence you have not finished. You wait. The crowd quiets, then stirs again, dissatisfied. This is not enough. They have not come for spectacle alone. They have come for closure. "Crucify him," someone shouts. The word lands cleanly, without echo, as if it has been rehearsed. Others take it up. The chant organizes itself with alarming speed, a sound like a single mouth learning what it wants. Crucify him. You raise your hand, but the gesture is slower now, less effective. The crowd does not fully obey. They are no longer waiting to be told. "Why?" you call out. "What evil has he done?" The question is honest. That is what makes it dangerous. The chant does not answer it. It replaces it. Crucify him. You glance at the priests. Caiaphas meets your gaze without hesitation. "He claims to be a king," he says, loudly now, for the benefit of the crowd. "And we have no king but Caesar." The phrase is chosen carefully. It is a gift wrapped in loyalty. Something tightens in your chest. Not pain, recognition.
"No friend of Caesar," someone shouts, and others repeat it, delighted by its usefulness. There it is.
The threat does not need to be explained. It does not need to be written. It travels quickly because everyone understands it. You look down at the man beside you. He is breathing steadily. His eyes are open. He does not look at the crowd. He looks at you. Not accusing, not pleading, waiting. You feel suddenly, acutely, the distance between what is right and what is survivable. You have crossed that distance before many times, often without noticing. This time the crossing announces itself. Your headache returns, not as pain, but as pressure, as if the inside of your skull has been packed with something that will not move unless you decide where it should go. You turn back to the crowd. "I find no guilt in him," you say again. The words fall flat, swallowed by the chant. Truth, it seems, has poor projection. You scan the faces below. They are no longer looking at him. They are looking at you, waiting to see what kind of man you will be. A basin of water is brought forward. You had not asked for it. Someone else has decided this would be helpful. The servant holding it does not meet your eyes. You stare at the water. It is still, clear, reflective. You understand the gesture immediately, and for a moment you consider refusing it, not because it would change anything, but because it would be honest. Instead, you place your hands into the basin. The water is cool. It slides over your skin, carrying dust and ink and something else you cannot see. You lift your hands and let them drip back into the bowl. "I am innocent of this man's blood," you say, clearly, formally. See to it yourselves. The words feel precise, complete. They also feel like they belong to someone else. The crowd roars its approval. Responsibility has been redistributed in a way everyone finds acceptable. You turn away before you can reconsider. Behind you, orders are given, ropes tightened. The machinery resumes its familiar rhythm. As you step back from the platform, the man's voice reaches you once more, not loud, not strained. "You have said enough," he says. You stop. For a moment, just one, you consider turning back, saying something else, anything else. You do not. You continue walking, the noise following you like a tide. And as the sound closes in behind you, as the day commits itself to the path it has chosen, you understand that the final conversation has not yet happened. It has only been postponed by hours, by distance, by fear, but not avoided. Chapter 15. What is left unsaid. Night returns without apology. The city does not sleep. It rearranges itself around absence. Fires burn lower. Voices grow hoarse. Somewhere a man retells the day with embellishment already forming. Somewhere else, someone listens and decides which parts will survive. You sit alone. The basin is gone. The platform is empty. The fortress has resumed its neutral posture, stone and routine pretending the afternoon did not happen. The headache has settled into a deep, constant pressure, no longer sharp enough to distract, too present to ignore. Banga lies at your feet, breathing slowly. Even he seems quieter than usual, as if the air itself has asked for restraint. You should be finished. The decision has been issued. Orders have been given. Rome will be satisfied, or at least unprovoked. The priests have what they wanted. The crowd has found its conclusion. And yet, a guard appears at the doorway, hesitant. He does not speak at once. He waits, as if hoping the moment will pass on its own. What is it? You ask. There is a delay, he says, before they take him. You do not ask which him. Why? The guard swallows. He asked to speak to you. You close your eyes. Of course he did. You do not move for a long moment. The request settles, heavy but unsurprising. This is the part no procedure prepared you for. The remainder, the loose thread. Where? You ask. The holding chamber, the guard replies. Below. You nod once. That is enough. The corridors are quieter now. Torches burn low, casting uneven light that exaggerates shadows and erases detail. Your footsteps sound louder than they should. You are aware of your breathing again, slow, deliberate, controlled. The kind you learned when control was the only thing left. The chamber is small, stone walls, a single lamp. The air smells faintly of iron and damp. He is seated on the bench, wrists still bound, robe gone now, replaced by something plain. He looks worse in the simpler garment, less ironic, more real. He looks up when you enter. Sit, you say, gesturing not to the bench, but to the low stool opposite him. You sit yourself before he can respond. The movement surprises you both. For a moment, neither of you speaks. The silence here is different from the others. It does not stretch. It rests. So, you say at last, you wanted to talk. Yes. You understand what comes next. Yes. The simplicity of it no longer irritates you. It only exhausts you. You could have avoided this, you say, earlier, even now. No, he replies, not without making it worse. For whom? He studies your face with that same unhurried attention, as if the answer requires looking rather than speaking. For you, he says. You almost laugh. The sound rises, then collapses inward. You are mistaken, you say. I will sleep tonight. I will wake tomorrow. Rome will continue. Yes, he agrees. All of that will happen. And yet, you say, sharper now, you speak as if something has failed. He tilts his head slightly. Something has been revealed. You lean forward despite yourself. What? He does not answer immediately. When he does, his voice is quiet enough that you have to lean closer to hear it. That you are not cruel, he says, and that you are afraid. The words land without accusation. That is what makes them unbearable. I have ordered men to die, you say, many times, without losing sleep. Yes, he says, that is why this is different. You feel the pressure behind your eyes increase, not pain but insistence. You speak in riddles, you say. No, he replies, I speak plainly. You are the one who has learned not to hear it. You sit back. The stool creaks faintly. You asked me about truth, he continues, and then you walked away. I was finished, you say. You were afraid of the answer. You clench your jaw. Then give it, you say. Now, before you go. He looks at you for a long moment. The lamp flickers, briefly throwing his shadow against the wall, tall and distorted. Truth, he says, is what remains when fear has finished speaking. The words do not feel like revelation. They feel like recognition, as if you have known them for years and simply avoided saying them aloud. You expect me to believe that? You ask. No, he says. I expect you to remember it. You shake your head. You place too much importance on one man. I place importance on this moment, he replies, on what you will do with it after I am gone. You stand abruptly. The movement sends a spike of pain through your temple. You welcome it. This is enough, you say. You asked to speak. You have spoken. Yes, he agrees. And you listened. That remains to be seen. He smiles faintly. Not kindly, not mockingly. With something like acceptance. You are tired, he says again. Not because of the sun. Because you have been holding yourself apart for too long. You turn away, then stop. The words have found a place you did not guard. Do you know, you ask without facing him, how many men have stood where you sit and spoken of justice? Yes. And they all believed themselves. Yes. Then what makes you different? You expect an answer about God,
about destiny, about kingdoms. Instead, he says, I am not asking you to agree with me. You turn back. I am asking you, he continues, to see yourself clearly. The guard shifts outside the doorway. Time has begun to press again. They are waiting, you say. Yes. You step closer. You do not lower your voice. If you are what they say you are, you ask, why do you allow this? He looks at his bound hands, then back at you. Because force cannot end what is true, he says. It can only reveal who used it. The guard clears his throat. It's time, he says. You hesitate. The pause is small, barely noticeable, but it exists. You meet the man's eyes one last time. You will be remembered, you say, and you do not know why. He shakes his head gently. You will, he replies. The guards step forward. He rises without resistance. As they lead him toward the door, he turns his head slightly. You asked what is truth, he says. When you are alone and the noise has faded, you will ask it again. The door closes. The sound echoes longer than it should. You remain standing in the small chamber, staring at the space he occupied. The lamp flickers, then steadies. The fortress breathes around you, stone indifferent to meaning. Outside, the city roars, not in anger now, but in anticipation of completion. You press your fingers to your temple. The pain does not respond. For the first time, it is not the headache that troubles you. It is the quiet certainty that when dawn comes, and this day has been absorbed into story and ritual and justification, the question will still be there, waiting. And this time, there will be no one left to ask it for you. Chapter 16. In the days after. Years later, the story will not belong to you. It will belong to priests, to followers, to men who are not there but need the day to mean something specific. Your name will appear in their accounts like a fixed point, an anchor for blame or justification. You will be described as cruel or reluctant or weak or cunning, whatever version makes the teller's world feel ordered. You will not correct them, not because you cannot, because you understand now that memory is not a court where evidence matters. It is a river that keeps what it can carry. Anything too heavy is reshaped, or dropped, or dragged along the bottom until it becomes unrecognizable. People do not remember what happened. They remember what they need. On certain mornings, when the light is sharp and the air thin, the headache returns with old familiarity. You press your fingers to your temple and wait for it to pass. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does not.
The pain has become part of your private weather. It arrives when it wants. It leaves when it wants. You have stopped treating it as an enemy. You treat it as a sign that the body keeps score, even when the mind insists it has moved on. Banga grows older beside you. His pace slows. His hearing dulls. He sleeps more and watches less. When he rises, there is a stiffness that was not there when he first trotted at your knee through Jerusalem's gate. He still follows you, but now he chooses shorter distances, conserving himself without shame. One day he does not rise when called. It is not dramatic. There is no omen. He simply remains where he is, breathing shallowly, eyes half open, as if he is looking at something far away that you cannot see. You sit with him on the floor, feeling the warmth leave his body in slow increments. Your hand rests on his shoulder, and the fur beneath your fingers is softer than you remember, worn down by time. When he is gone, the world continues without adjusting for that loss. You understand. The sea still breathes beyond the walls. Men still argue about fees. Soldiers still change shifts. A clerk still arrives with a tablet and waits for your seal. Life does not pause because a loyal creature stops breathing. It simply moves around the absence and keeps going. At night, when the city is quiet and the sea's rhythm fills the spaces between thoughts, you find yourself thinking, not of judgment, not of Rome, not even of guilt. You think of the question, not because you expect an answer. You have learned over years that answers are often temporary. They satisfy for a moment, then fade, replaced by the next demand. A province can be governed by answers. A life cannot always be lived by them. You think of the question because it remains. It has become a kind of companion, less heavy than regret, less flattering than conscience. It does not accuse. It does not comfort. It simply waits. Sometimes, when you wake before dawn, you lie still and listen to the sea. You feel the faint pressure behind the eyes and accept it. You let the darkness hold you without needing to fill it with explanations. You remember with quiet clarity the way the day in Jerusalem thinned into an afternoon of paperwork. The way your hand did not shake. The way the city continued. The way silence arrived after shouting and then became its own kind of noise. You do not know what your decision meant in the language of gods. You are not fluent in that language. You know only what it meant in the language of men. A crowd was satisfied. A priesthood was relieved. Rome was not offended, and you remained in your chair. The world continued in the shape it already had, and still the question remains. Not as a punishment, not as a prophecy, as a fact, something that does not resolve. It simply stays, waiting.